Hi guys, I hope you're all doing well, and I want to welcome you back to another episode of the Just Music Podcast. I had the opportunity to sit down with a good colleague and friend, Megan Magsarili. I'm really excited about this. She's an opera singer, a choral singer, and she had a lot of cool perspectives that we talked about in this episode. Megan now joins in progress.
Okay. Drink my coffee.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Just Music Podcast. I'm super excited. I have a very special guest on the podcast today, a colleague, a friend, somebody else that teaches alongside of me. She's an opera singer, a student at MSU, and I'd like to welcome Megan Magsarili to the Just Music Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Justin. It's so good to be here.
So
I've never been on a podcast, so I'm excited.
It's fun. For some of the listeners out there, this is like a brand new project that I've really only just kind of stepped into. So it's really kind of exciting to just get different people on the program and kind of just talk about music and see what their experiences are. And it's just really cool to gain new perspectives from those individuals. So I would like to start off with you kind of giving yourself a little bit of an introduction. I know you're not originally from the Lansing area, so I'd like you to give a little introduction about where you came from and how you came to this area, and kind of like how your musical journey started out.
Of course. So I'm originally from Portland, Oregon. How did I get to the Midwest? Well, I started my education in Chicago at DePaul University, and I was there for all of my undergrad, and then I took a year off, and I stayed in the city. I taught there privately, gigged around, had a church job. And then one of the highlights of that year was actually being a member of the Chicago Symphony Chorus. So that was really cool. So a lot of my professional work as a singer has actually been choral, which was it's not super intentional, but also not unintentional. So, but in school, I've been in so many operas, too many to count, 3 a year in undergrad, and 2 a year at MSU. Mm-hmm. So, I'm currently a graduate student finishing up my degree. I'll be done in a week. Trying to do that last week, get through it.
Right. So for a lot of, and I'm sure everybody that's listening is aware, obviously, students across, the entire world are moving to online platforms for lecture. And obviously, I would imagine that that's challenging to try to, finish your time up when music is like one of those types of pursuits and degrees where it's really hard to do it in an online format, especially like rehearsals. And I know, unfortunately, a lot of some of your performances were canceled due to this whole global issue.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. My life has completely just flipped. It's kind of crazy. A month ago, weeks ago, I don't know how long ago this all started, but I was at work when I found out that the school had closed. Yeah. And I was super stressed out that day because I was working, and then I had to go straight from work to a rehearsal, and then we were in tech for the opera, so I was going to have another rehearsal until 10 p.m. at night for the opera, and we were doing staging, and I was stressed about my 12-hour day, and then all of a sudden everything was canceled. Right. And they're like, okay, everything's virtual now, and I was like, what? How am I supposed to finish my degree? Am I going to get my degree? What's going to happen? Right. So we figured it out. I still have weekly lessons and coachings, which are, they're not the same, but it's still really nice to be able to check in with my professors, because even though it's not ideal, they still have so much knowledge and insight, and such a good support system to have.
Of course, yeah.
So that's been really nice to kind of just check in. It's been interesting because I don't know if you've dealt with this in your teaching as well, but there's the technology has been an interesting thing to try to navigate, because my vocal coach is an accompanist and she doesn't have a piano. So like we've had to work on other things, and I've had to like play my notes and stuff every so often. And like my voice teacher's really pretty good at the piano, but like she can't play the accompaniments with me necessarily because there's a lag. And so it's been interesting. And then teaching's a whole nother ball game. So
I will say that the one positive thing about it though is if you can take a positive aspect out of this is I really would pity our situation if we were in a time where we didn't have access to technology the way that we do. Like if we were to be going to school, like let's say in the 80s, like I don't even know how you would even accomplish anything, because there was no such thing as an online education during that time.
No,
at least that I'm aware of. So
yeah, it's been we're really lucky in that sense. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
No, that's okay. So, well, I was gonna ask because I know that this was so interesting to me too. Because I mean, I was an instrumental major, so I don't really know anything about the ins and outs of kind of vocal performance and vocal training. But given that you were both kind of in choral music and then opera, is there like an area that you prefer, or do you kind of like dabbling in both, or do you kind of prefer one over the other?
I like both. Right now, my focus is pursuing an opera career, but I don't want to. I always want to have a choral outlet of some kind, and it's just actually recently. This was actually just this week. I did kind of a virtual choral experience. With some of my colleagues from Chicago, and we can talk about that whenever. But that was really cool and kind of moving in a way, because I hadn't really done a ton of like, other than lessons and coachings, performance or collaborating. And I really, really missed doing that. So that was a really cool thing that we did this week. So yeah.
Okay, so I don't want to forget that thought, because I want to go into that. But before that, who do you study with at MSU? I'm curious. Who is your teacher? Is it Fracker?
No, I study with Professor Vanel.
Oh, okay. I see. The thing is, I don't know much of the MSU faculty, but I do know Fracker because I actually went to school. I went through elementary school all the way through high school with his daughter, Emily.
Oh, wow.
And
I've worked a lot with Professor Fracker too.
We
went to Italy and China together.
Oh, nice. Well, unfortunately, don't want to go to China now or Italy.
I know. I don't want to go to either place. I'm lucky I went a year ago and I did.
It's just so interesting how the world is really kind of small, because like I remember like when we were in like elementary school or grade school for that matter, and we would have like bring your parent to work day or whatever, and Emily, his daughter, would bring him in, and he's like, I'm a professional opera singer. And everybody was just like, I mean, to try to explain that to like a 6 to 10-year-old kid is like, wait, what? You do what? Which is, I always think that's really cool. So that's why I asked. But yeah, so given the circumstances and how we're kind of segueing into that with the virus and everything like that, but like, I knew you mentioned that you're doing some collaborating or kind of working with some of your friends from Chicago. So how is that with, kind of doing that online?
So I've never done anything like that before. I'm surprised I didn't mess it up, but my role was, just one of four other, there were four of us. And then, and then the guy that kind of like got us all together. So anyway, essentially we did a, performance of this Filipino song called, Dahil Sa'yo. And we're all Filipino singers. And actually, we had done a performance of this when I was living in Chicago. We kind of like created a little ensemble and put on a show in collaboration with this nonprofit called Hearing in Color. Okay. And essentially, it just, it's a nonprofit that wants to highlight like music and art from like a specific culture, and usually those are underrepresented cultures in in music in general, and so yeah, that's a really cool organization, And one of our colleagues, he's like the artistic director of it, and he was like, hey, you guys, you had a really great concert a couple years ago. Like, I think it'd be cool to do one of the songs from that virtually. So we all like recorded our part with the performance we did a while ago.
Huh.
And then my friend Anna, she edited it and made a lovely video, and they posted it on their Facebook page, and it's been getting shared around, and it's pretty cool. Like, it's nothing like I've ever done before, but probably just as rewarding as a live performance.
Sure, yeah.
It's really, you know, nice to hear people sharing it, or like sending messages like, oh, that was so moving, or just leaving comments or anything. So that was cool.
Well, we'll make sure to have the link in the description for that, because I would love to check that out. Yeah, it's interesting.
It's really cool.
I think you know, this has been a time where it's new territory for all of us, but I think you're seeing this real big surge of people getting into technology and starting to do more online platforms for like concerts and stuff. And I've seen, God, what was it that there was? I can't remember where it was, but there was an opera company that was doing live streams of old operas, and I can't.
Oh yeah, well the Met's doing it.
Yes, that's what it.
They're doing that for sure.
So that it's interesting to see that, because I know, like per my previous conversations with other people and their experiences, that they are starting to do a lot more live streaming on different platforms, more than they have ever done before. Because, I mean, you know, typically, like when you think of going to a concert, you don't think of opening up your computer, right? You think about driving to a physical location, you know, to witness it firsthand. Yeah. But yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it's definitely, it's also, you know, kind of like, as bad as this whole situation is, you're seeing a lot of good in people. I know there's all kinds of negative stuff on the media, but like when you mentioned that, where the people are, you know, commenting about how much they enjoy this, or, you know, how much they're, you know, getting a positive reaction out of something, that is moving and touching. Because it's like, you know, yeah, with all this negativity in the world, there's still good in the world as well.
Yeah. And it's also kind of like, you know, opened a new door for me, because I, like before, like would never have posted, like I don't think I have anything on the internet of me singing. And like, just like recently I've like, oh, just like posted a story of me singing, or like, I saw that yesterday. You know, oh yeah, that was me and my boredom. One of my favorite YouTubers, Colleen Ballinger, she like on her story did the Broadway karaoke thing. And I was like, oh, that's fun. I'm super bored. And then after I like posted all of them, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just posted those and I was singing and I wasn't taking myself seriously. And I was like, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe I don't need to be so serious all the time.
Right.
And just have fun and kind of like reconnect with why I started doing this, because it was fun.
Right. And I know like when I first started kind of like posting things online of me like playing or like covering something or working on a piece, there was always like that, you know, I was always kind of apprehensive about, you know, oh, well, what if I fuddy it or whatever, and somebody like, you know, judges me or I have backlash. So I was always nervous about that. But then I kind of like let that go. And like when I look back at some of my old videos, I was like, oh my God, like it's so bad. But for me, it's like I kind of look at it as like a memento of my development and my musicality, because I'm like thinking, okay, well, this is where I started. This is where I am here now. And this is where this is where I want to be, you know? And so that's kind of cool to be able to document that. So like, you know, in regards to you starting to post that kind of stuff, it's kind of like, you know, cool to have that, so that one day you can look at it and say, oh, 3 years ago I did that. Wow, I was
3 years ago
not that good. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I have recorded all my lessons like since I started singing, and it's definitely funny to go back and like listen to my very first voice lessons that I ever had in college. Like, oh my gosh, you won't see those on the internet.
So I have my exactly 1 year ago, well, it was last week, exactly 1 year ago, but on April 14th of 2019, so a few days ago, is when I had my senior recital. And so I still watch it sometimes, you know, when I'm just like, oh, you know, I want to feel in a feisty mood to critique myself. But then I came up as one of my, memories on Facebook or whatever when I had posted it. And I just thought to myself, so I, rewatched it and I was like, man, and then I reposted again and I said, I really do feel for those students who don't have the ability to have their senior recital, because I was so blessed to be able to do that. And so I really do I really do feel for those students' circumstances, just because I know that's got to be really tough.
Yeah, that was probably the hardest part. Not necessarily even my recital, because hopefully I will be able to do it in the future. I'm still planning on doing that program of music, whenever we can go in public again. So I'm keeping that up in my lessons and stuff, because I did work really hard on it, and I technically do need it for my degree.
Right.
My teacher's, signing off that I did the preparation right now, but I do plan to do it in the future. But like the opera was really, really difficult to kind of process. Like we were a week away,
right?
And I'd been spending, oh my gosh, I spent so many hours on that role. Right. I'd never, done a role that demanding before. If we're talking about the opera, by the way, La Clemenza di Tito by Mozart, I was going to play Sesto, which is one of my dream roles. And I'm so glad that I learned it. Like, it's amazing. And I got the coaching from the maestro and all of the professors at MSU. I'm so lucky that I got that opportunity. I'm trying to focus on that. Right. But, the fact that we got all the way to staging in the theater with the set, and then, the next day it was canceled. That was, whew.
Yeah, that's tough.
I had to sit with that for a week and just cry for a while.
But, on a positive note, though, it is cool that, you're still being successful in terms of, still finishing the degree. And then, ultimately, it's not like it's going to be your last performance ever or something like that.
No. Yeah. I'm very lucky in that sense.
And so I've been thinking about this too. It's like a lot of these students, though, because unfortunately they had so many of their things canceled. It's like they're so young in their careers, though, and so we have so many more gigs and so many more concerts and performances that we're going to do. But on the flip side of that, it's also kind of challenging for us, because since we're not as established as somebody who's, been doing a career of music for 30 plus years or something, it's like now we're trying to step out into doing this as a career, and then all of a sudden this big issue happens where it just hinders that entire process.
I know. Yeah, that's been I'm still trying to figure that out. Everyone's being so creative, though. It's really cool to see what people are doing, and I'm so glad that you're doing this. I would have never thought to start a podcast.
Well, it's just kind of fun.
It's a great outlet.
Yeah, it's fun though, because this is giving me an opportunity to get to, like I said, gain new perspectives and just in our pursuits. Normally, classical guitarists probably would never ever cross paths with a choral or opera singer. Maybe in 21st century music, maybe there's a composer out there, but you're not seeing Whitaker composing pieces for guitar and a choir.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool that we get to collaborate in this way, because I think going back to technology and collaborating and how that's changed, it's really cool, because we taught at the same school, but we teach private lessons, and so we don't always see each other in passing. And I've met you, and I've seen you around and stuff, but it's yeah, but this is that we're actually hanging out, and it's because of this global pandemic that we are. So that's kind of cool.
It is interesting when you work for an academy or you teach at something like that, because when I first started teaching, which it was brand new experience for me, because I was fresh graduated, and then I quit all of my typical hourly jobs, and then I fully stepped into doing music full time. That's all I was doing. And then so I was gaining all these students and stuff, and I was like, I'm going to gain all these relationships with all these cool people. And then after working there for several months, I still hardly knew anybody that worked at the academy. And so like I would like read people's bios, and then because on the website, the place in which we work at the academy, there's bios of every single instructor, and I was like, okay, everybody here's MSU, and there's little old me.
Well, yeah, you're there. You're doing great. We're all there, but it's interesting that we don't see each other. It's like, oh, hi, I've seen you before.
Right.
But yeah, teaching's been fun. This to kind of circle back to that.
Right.
How many have you been able to do online lessons and stuff?
Yeah, I have a few. This is what's really, really tough.
Same. I have a couple.
I went from, because I was teaching Monday through Thursday, and then I teach Saturday at a separate academy. And so I would have pretty much a full week of teaching. So I went from like 25 students to now I only have like 4.
Yeah, I have 3 right now.
Yeah, but it's been good, and it's been a real good eye opener for these types of issues, because we do kind of have to be creative with our income. And one of the gigs that I was doing, and I started there in December, is I was actually playing at Horrocks like every single weekend.
Oh yeah.
And for those who are listening who don't know who Horrocks is, Horrocks is a family-owned farmers market grocery store with all kinds of cool stuff in it right here in the Lansing area. I think they have a couple different locations in other mid-Michigan areas, but it's kind of a staple of the Lansing area. And so I had this opportunity to play there pretty much every single weekend until one day I came in to play, and the owner was like, "Bud, I got to let you go. You can't be in here. You got to get out of here. We can't have you here. You're non-essential." And I was like, yeah, man, I know. So that was tough, because that was like one of those gigs where I could pretty much select any type of music that I really wanted to play. And it was, all my, lead, except I started there when I was playing in December time. So I had to play only Christmas music. And so like,
one of those.
I was like so tired of Christmas music. So when it became like December 26th, I was done with it. I was so over it.
We're moving on.
Yeah. So this is a good segue. So I know we kind of talked about, you're kind of being in choral music and opera. Now, do you have like a favorite composer that you like to sing, or a favorite artist that you kind of gravitate towards a lot, where you're just like, oh, I love their work and I really, really enjoy singing it?
Oh gosh. As far as like what I love to sing, let's see. Mozart, I came to love singing Mozart. That is a journey I have gone through these past couple of months with Sesto, and I'm pulling out some other arias and working on them in my lessons now, just because I have that in my brain, and so I'm like, I don't want to lose that, because especially like for my voice type and my age, Mozart is done a lot, and I would be cast in those, maybe if not now, kind of sort of in the near future. So it's important to be well versed in those roles.
Sure, yeah.
So Mozart, I guess. As far as like composers I love, Poulenc. I love singing Poulenc, French music. Brahms writes very well for the mezzo voice. Let's see. Well, I haven't really sung any of her works because I'm only now just discovering kind of this composer musician, but for one of my comp exams next week, I'm presenting about the 19th century mezzo-soprano Pauline Viardot, and she is super cool. Definitely worth a Google search and Wikipedia read. She is like a crazy prodigy. Like she's fluent in like Italian and German and French and pretty fluent in Russian. Like she wrote music in all of these languages. And she was, contemporaries of Brahms and Fauré, and like Liszt commented on her piano skills.
Oh, that means a lot for Liszt, especially if he's got.
She wasn't. Yeah, exactly. Like she was a singer, and that's the career path that was, I don't know, chosen for her, sort of. I think she wanted to be a concert pianist, but I mean, she had a crazy range too. She could sing all the way, like from a low C, like the C below middle C, all the way up to like F6, I think that's what it is. So she could do all the roles. Really, really cool lady. So that's been fun. It's been fun to read about her. And like, I never had heard of her in school or anything in the 6 years I've been in music school.
Right.
And now that I'm finishing up, I'm like, how did I go through this many years and not know who she was? So I'm kind of glad I have the time to look into who she is, and what all the music that she composed and performed, and learning about her career and everything. It's really awesome.
I would say, just from my personal experience, and piggyback off what you're kind of going into, is I would say like that's the one kind of downside of pursuing a music education, is a lot of the times like you're kind of told what you should be practicing, and your teachers or your professors in this case kind of say, okay, learn this piece, this is a freshman level piece, sophomore level piece, etc. And so then like now that I'm out and I'm like kind of free game to like really kind of pick and choose the composers and stuff that I'm working at, I'm like, wow, like one of these guys that I've been working on is Mauro Giuliani. He's a really prolific Italian guitarist, and I'm like playing his music all the time, and I have his collection of works. I'm just like, how come I've never played any of this until now?
Exactly.
But what I wanted to ask too, though, is like what I always found interesting, and I went to school with a few singers, is when I got to do my studio classes, I'm not sure, maybe MSU uses a similar term, but like basically when you perform in front of your peers,
same thing.
All of the instrumentalists were always allowed to use their music, because I mean, we would have to, whatever, if we're playing a 4 to 6 minute piece or whatever, and you have 4 pages of music or whatever it may be, that's a lot to remember. But I never understood why singers were disadvantaged in this regard, because I was like, why do they always have to memorize music, but like us as instrumentalists, because they have our music in front of us the entire time? And I always thought that was so unfair. Why is that?
I think it's partially because of performance practice, because unless it's kind of a chamber piece, when you do a recital, it's all memorized,
right?
Which is definitely daunting if you're doing multiple languages, because it's not like you just can memorize it like rote memory. You have to memorize what you're saying, and
right.
All that goes into that. So, I mean, yeah, it's definitely like hard, but I think we have to do that because our teachers want us to be able to perform the pieces how they, I guess, should be performed or were intended to be performed by the composer. I mean, it's kind of like, people do use their music in studio class if they need to, because it's like, if you aren't quite performance ready and you want to get it in front of people, they're really, they're pretty flexible about that. But the ultimate goal, yes, is memory.
Just to memorize it.
And that's, with opera, because there's actual staging. We can't be looking at music while we're doing staging and interacting with, other characters. So.
Right. Oh, let me look at my text.
So yeah. Oh yeah. Hold on. Let me just look at the super titles above me.
Yeah. What act is this?
Yeah, I know. That wouldn't.
It's interesting because I feel like, for me, I've always had music in front of me. So this is one thing that I've struggled with, because I've never, ever had to memorize. I mean, there's certainly pieces that I have memorized unintentionally just because I practice them so much, or I play them so frequently, so I know them. But when I auditioned into grad school, one of the requirements was I had to play 15 minutes worth of music from 3 different composers from 3 different time genres. So that was like a Bach piece, romantic era, which would be like Sora, Giuliani, or like Mozart, but Mozart is not much on guitar. And then you had to do like a 20th century. So you had to do like a Villa-Lobos or a Leo Brouwer or something like that, some more contemporary music. And so when that was a requirement, and I had to go through this and play this, and the scales and stuff, I wasn't worried about that because obviously you have scales pretty easy. But that was such a stress for me. And I was like emailing the professor that was gonna, basically be in charge of my audition. I was like, is it mandatory for me to learn this music? Because I only have 2 months to prepare for it, and I'm nervous about having to learn to memorize this. And he's like, if it's that big of a problem, then we'll let it go by. But from now on, when we're working together, we're gonna really focus a lot of the time on getting you to memorize your music. But that's a bit daunting though, because it
is.
These professors though are also, have their doctorate degrees and stuff, and they'll put on hour to an hour and a half long concerts, all from memory. And I'm just like, how do you?
Yeah.
How?
So it's very impressive. I'm happy to share. I've had a couple of, I'm not a natural memorizer. I feel like it's definitely still a stressor with me, especially if I'm, learning with a short amount of time, or it's not the only thing I have to perform in a short amount of time. I think it is a little bit, well, I don't know if it's easier with text, because I memorize best by marrying the words to the meaning. So if I'm actually feel like I can say in English what I'm trying to communicate in whatever the language is, then it's easier because there's a meaning behind it. And I know that whenever there's something set to music, it's easier to memorize because our brains connect the two.
Sure, yeah.
Definitely learning dialogue is sometimes harder. It's harder in a different language. I think if it's in English, you can put that meaning behind it.
Right.
So yeah, it's if you're not it's really hard to just recite, but if it's connected to emotion and intention, then usually it's a little bit easier. But we get that with text. But the music helps with that too.
Right.
But yeah, memorization, that's a thing.
I just remember when I first saw those requirements, and I was so stressed out about it. And then once I got there and I played the pieces, and I was I didn't even hardly reference my music to begin with, because I was just so focused on what I was doing. And for me, I think it was just one of those things where it's just it's a comfort type thing.
Yeah.
So if you do have a memory slip or something, you're like, okay, look at the page and kind of catch up where you're at. But it's interesting that you talk about your memorization techniques are kind of, putting meanings to the text of the words that you're singing. And for me, I think about positions that I'm in. So if I'm down in first position and I have a bunch of phrases down here, I'll think, okay, well then I tie it together and okay, that's what I would think is group one, which will cover, the first 8 measures or whatever. And then, then I maybe I'm ascending in position. So then I start grouping, kind of the ideas of where I am in positions and kind of thinking of the shapes. And that's kind of a way that I've been trying to approach it. But then when I approach it that way, I'm not thinking about the notes that I'm playing, which I think is bad, because I'm not thinking, because I'm only thinking about the positions and the shapes, and I'm not thinking about what notes I'm actually playing. So that's one thing that I've been trying to focus on, is trying to get really more comfortable with memorizing.
Yeah. And I think, singers, like you said, we're at a different disadvantage in that we have to memorize everything. But I think it's also it's an advantage in a way that if I'm going to play something on piano, or which is I'm not as good on that as I am in singing, or as comfortable. Right. It's if I can't. I usually try to sing it in my head, or if I'm accompanying a student at lesson and I miss some notes, I'm it goes like this, I'm gonna just sing it, it's nice to be able to hear it in that way, be able to sing a piece of music I don't know, it just helps with memory and like marrying the music to your body a little bit more, like internally. So yeah, that's my journey with memorization, I guess.
So I have a question in terms of like, and I know like with singers, you know, there's obviously solo work and then like, you know, collective chamber work where you're, you know, working with other singers. So do you have a preference on that? Do you, you know, like, I don't know, for me, since I do so much solo gigs on my own, I really enjoy that because then I'm only responsible for myself, and I'm the only one that's responsible for learning the music that I'm going to play. And then I don't have to worry about, you know, splitting the gig money or whatever it may be. But then when I do work with another musician, or if I play like when I play in jazz ensemble, that's just like a feeling that I really enjoy because I'm like, God, you know, I kind of miss working with other people because then you're like, you know, feeding off other people's energy. And sometimes you just don't get that as much when you're doing it as a soloist. It's kind of, it comes and goes.
Yeah, I mean, rarely I feel like am I by myself completely. So, I mean, that's also why this has been so difficult because we don't have our collaborative pianists with us playing for our lessons. But yeah, definitely like feeding off the energy of someone else is, you know, one of the joys of performing. And, you know, whether it's someone else on stage if you're collaborating or just like sharing an energy with the audience and making that connection, that's also really cool. So yeah, I feel like as a soloist, we're still collaborating because we have pianists that we sing with most of the time. I mean, there are pieces that are written for that are unaccompanied or a cappella. As far as like, I want to do a lot more like chamber works. Oh, okay. So I've done a lot of choral, I've done a lot of opera, and on my recital, I was going to do this Ravel piece called Chanson Maracas, and it's written for voice, piano, flute, and cello. Oh, okay. And we had a rehearsal, and it went really well. And it's, you know, Ravel, so Ravel's kind of technically difficult.
Yeah, right.
And it was really great to learn. And, you know, so that's why I'm hoping still I'll be able to do my recital because I really, really want to do that piece.
Right.
It was also, you know, it took a lot of time to get to a performance level, but that didn't have to be memorized because it was chamber. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah. Well, I really do hope, and I really do think that, you know, a lot of these gigs will be able to resume for you.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's not, you know, something we don't have to worry too much about, because I know that definitely does kind of stink a little bit. But so my next question is to you, as far as I know, you're kind of your angle is you want to kind of like work for an opera company. Now I know there's, you know, different kind of opera companies and, you know, kind of spots and areas. Now, are you thinking about like going overseas to do that, like in the European area, or you want to do that right here solely in the States? Or I'm just curious about that.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, for me, really nothing's off the table. I mean, getting work as like an opera singer is difficult enough. So I'm not gonna like put any restrictions on that. I'm basically just gonna, you know, now that I'm not in school anymore, keep auditioning, and just kind of see where I end up. It's kind of the situation we're in right now is really interesting because, you know, I did do some auditions, you know, that I could do while I was in school for next year and like over the summer. And, you know, one, I'm waiting to hear back, and that's a gig in Chicago, but it's like, you know, I know they're going through like, going through, all the companies are just going through it right now, like financially and just with programming and having to decide what they're going to do next year. Like, can they still do what they had planned? So it's kind of, there's that. And then I also have, you know, gotten emails from places I auditioned at, like, we're not sure if we can do our season next year because we're just a really small company. And so we'll keep you posted about anything. But it's just, that's kind of been difficult, I feel like, for a lot of artists right now.
Right.
You know, obviously, I mean, hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully it's not going to be like this forever. I mean, it won't be like this forever.
Oh, forever.
The foreseeable future.
Right.
We don't know how this virus acts. Like, it's kind of scary in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So
next year's a little uncertain.
Yeah, right. All right, Megan, I have just a couple more questions for you. So my second to last question, what do you think like musicians can take away from having all this time off? I know we kind of touched on it briefly a little bit about maybe being able to dabble in more technology or practicing a little bit more, but just kind of beyond the surface level aspect, what do you think musicians can, take away from this, or, kind of like utilize their time in the best way possible?
Ooh,
Ladies and gentlemen, I stumped her.
Oh gosh, yeah. Let me look at my notes. Hold on.
She also came
I
prepared.
definitely wrote down points for this. Yeah. Okay. I mean, sorry, what was the question? Can you just repeat the question one more time?
My question is,
like...
no, that's all right. So what do you think, musicians can take away from this, as far as like, some of them obviously being off of work and being able to utilize their time in the best way possible? What do you think that they can be doing to utilize that time?
Yeah. I mean, so I've done a couple things, not a ton. That collaboration I talked about, and doing lessons and coachings virtually, if that's available. I also think that it's really important to kind of like realize that, I don't know, as a musician and as a student, like I basically every single day when I was in school was like 12, like weekdays were like 12 hours. Like I was awake and I would be going, and then I would go until I went to sleep, essentially. Mm-hmm. And on the weekends I would like work 8-hour shifts. So it was like I was almost getting to the point of being burnt out, and then like all of a sudden everything stopped. And it kind of brought me back to when I took my year off, and that was kind of like a similar shock because I'd been in school my entire life, and now, I had gigs and I had teaching and stuff, but I definitely had a lot of time on my hands. Mm-hmm. And so, I still practiced. I would go downtown to Harold Washington Library and check out a practice room, but, you could only be there for an hour. Oh, wow. And so I had to make that hour count. Right. But, there's so much you can do outside of just singing full out. Like I probably don't practice, if I'm in a practice room singing full out for more than an hour. I do a lot of like mental work to outside of the practice room. That's really important, whether it's like on languages or just listening or sure, yeah. But I mean, so I would go practice, but as a musician, learning that like, you can have balance in your life, and we do have extra time. So one thing that I struggled with initially was like, oh my gosh, I need to be like practicing and be productive like all the time, every hour that I'm awake, because that's what I've been doing. But then I had to think about like, that's not super healthy to do for the rest of your life. So exactly. I kind of incorporated exercising back into my day, and reading, and playing video games sometimes and watching Netflix. Like that's okay too. Right. Yeah. So I'm trying to like be okay with having extra time, and knowing that it's okay to not fill all of my extra time with just like being super focused and practicing like every hour of the day.
Rigorous practice all the time.
Yeah, because I mean, practice it's more about, quality over amount of time.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It's like, for sure, like, I mean, time is important, but if you're not being productive during the time, then it's, you know, so it's all about a balance. And I think that's something that we can, as musicians who work really hard in practice,
Right.
That's something we can think about, is like, live your life too. Do other things besides music, and your music might get better.
Right. It has definitely been nice to be able to kind of like take a little bit of a breather and like decompress a little bit. And I think sometimes, especially like, and you mentioned that you're working so much and you're, you know, doing all this education, and so sometimes it is nice to have that break and kind of, you know, kind of recenter, you know, almost like a meditation period. So this is my last question for you, and if you could give any advice to any aspiring singers out there, or any of your students that may be seeing this, or just anybody who you know, has all this time on their hands and they're thinking about either picking up music again, or, you know, I don't know, maybe trying it for the first time, what would your advice be to them?
Well,
no, good questions, right?
Yeah, really good question. I know I'm giving advice. I have to make sure that it's good. I would say, like, realize that, you know, find inspiration. So if you're thinking about starting music, like, what music do you like to listen to? What brings you joy? And kind of having that as something that you focus on when you first start lessons. And then on the flip side, also realizing that if you're going to start, you know, a musical endeavor, that your inspirations are not, they're like the end goal, right. Or something to look up to. And it's going to be, it's going to take a lot of practice and a lot of time, but, and, you know, if you do practice and spend the time, eventually you can achieve, you know, what they have achieved. But, you know, initially it's going to be discouraging sometimes, but then, you know, think about all the people that you look up to, and yeah. That would be my advice for aspiring musicians.
All right. Well, wise words from Megan. Well, Megan, I'd like to thank you for being on the Just Music podcast. I've really enjoyed this. This is nice. I'm getting to know you a little bit more in your musicality aspect of your life, but also just you as an individual and your personality. So that's been super cool. So thank you again for being on the Just Music podcast.
Thank you so much, Justin, for having me. This was great. Never would have experienced it before.
Alrighty, Megan, take care.
You too. Bye.
Alright guys, that was the video. I hope you really liked it. Make sure you check out the description. It will have all the links that Megan and I discussed in the podcast. So make sure you guys give that a check out. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care, guys.